and welcome to KBLP with Encounters of the Strange Kind. Yes, this is pre-recorded. I'm sorry I have to work till 1, so hope you give it a listen. Anyway, we're going to talk about phantom cars, ghosts, trains, planes, and automobiles tonight. So, let's get started. There's a whole range of ghostly phenomena out there, as we all know, ranging from hauntings to specter apparitions and even other stranger, weirder things. There's no common explanation for it, and it all swirls out there beyond our understanding. One very bizarre type of phantom encounter is that of the mysterious vehicles that don't seem to be firmly anchored in this world. They cruise about on the periphery of our understanding, inviting many questions but answering few. One of the most well-known of the phantom cars is the one that originates in the former Soviet Union. It involves a phantom black vehicle and is known as the Black Volga. This spectral vehicle and its tails go back to the 60s and 70s. What an intimidating jet-black Volga limousine with white rims, tinted windows, curtains, horns on its rearview mirrors, and it's often described as completely spotless, and with the ability to accelerate way faster than a normal car. And it was said to roam about all over the Soviet Union, and in some cases, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, and Mongolia. And it terrorized locals wherever it went. And the tale goes that the phantom Black Volga would appear from seemingly out of nowhere to pull up to people, mostly children, and abduct them. And anyone who tried to interfere in this dark business or come too close was said to either drop dead on the site or within 24 hours of their encounter. This makes a mysterious vehicle a sight that instilled great fear in anyone who laid eyes on it. In some stories, the car is said to be completely impervious to damage as well. One harrowing 1960s report from the Ukraine told of the mysterious black car pulling up to two young girls. The doors opened, and the two were seemingly sucked into the vehicle as if it were a vacuum. The witness, a middle-aged man, ran to their aid and pried the driver's side door open. Of course, he didn't drop dead, as lore suggests. When the door was open, the witness was able to see there was no one behind the wheel, and the front of the car was completely empty. That was about all that he was able to ascertain before there was allegedly a blinding white flash, and the man woke up 24 hours later with a horrible, terrible headache. Throughout these spooky incidents, no one was ever able to see who was driving the car or cars, and this led to speculation over who could possibly be driving. Some theories claim that the victims were killed so that their organs could be sold on the black market. Others pointed to a shadowy group trying to sow social unrest, while others, of course, blamed the government or Satanists or some other dark cult. Many locals went as far as to claim that the devil himself was driving the Black Volga. In recent years, there have even been suggestions it was none other than the MIB, Men in Black themselves, on some nefarious UFO-related mission. Considering that the Volga was an extremely expensive luxury vehicle at the time, only driven by the most affluent, it was thought that whoever was in there was wealthy and or well-connected. After the 70s, accounts of the mysterious Black Volga drop off, so it's hard to ascertain how true any of these eerie stories are. What was the Black Volga? Was it, as has variously been speculated, a possessed car powered by a mysterious force? Or is it all government propaganda, fear-mongering, or merely an urban legend? No one knows, but the tale has sown terror throughout the area. A more modern version of the Black Volga from the same region involves a black BMW or Mercedes, often described with horns coming out of the rearview mirrors, or where the rearview mirror should be. The car is driven by a mysterious man who will only ask for the time, only to kill the person when they approach or whisk them off to who knows where. Kind of shades of Nosferatu here, Moving over to the United Kingdom, we have tales of a phantom car from the villages of Montalbot in Ireland. In the 20s, there was a frequently reported a spectral motor car that went faster than anything available and could phase through whatever got in its way. This article from January 22nd, 1927, said of this vehicle, witnesses in the locality state that on many occasions about midnight, a mysterious vehicle somewhat like a high-powered motor car, ablaze with light, dashes noisily through the roads. There is apparently no driver, but seated in the car are a number of white-robed figures. Walls, ditches, fields, and plantations present no obstacle to the car. The superstitiously inclined connect the visitation with a tragic occurrence in a neighboring estate when during the recent troubles, a landlord and his wife were driving from their homes and died of fright. Local inhabitants are afraid to leave their homes after nightfall. Wow. Anyway, in later years, we have reports from the 50s of a ghostly car said to terrorize a stretch of desolate road in Kent County. That's in southeast England. The car was usually described as black and a very old-fashioned make and model, but was said to have the speed, handling, and capabilities of something far more advanced. While a driver usually was not seen to be present in the vehicle, it seemed to be driving itself. There are other reports of a fog-like wraith said to be its driver. And this report of October 1950 said of the account, driving through Hildenborough at 7 a.m. on Sunday, a motorist observed another car parked by the roadside in a deserted spot. He saw the shadow of a man outlined against the mist in the driving seat. He got out of his own car and shook the other car violently, but the huddled figure did not move. Tonbridge police were told, but on investigation, they could not find a car on that road, and now take the very material view that the silent driver was waiting for the mist to rise before proceeding. In other countries, we come to Australia. There's a surprise, right? Good old Australia. It also has this report of phantom vehicles, especially in an area near a town known as Kenya. Here there is said to be a spectral car that tears along the roads at great speed, only to vanish into thin air without any warning. One incident from 2012 now allegedly happened to 3 MotoGP race car drivers heading from an event at Phillip Island, Victoria, back to their hometown in South Australia, a journey of about 560 miles, meaning they would drive all night in shifts. At the time of their incident, one of the drivers was asleep in the back while the other 2 were awake in the front. It was about 4:30 a.m., and they were between the towns of Nihil and Kaniva, and the witness would tell. I'd only seen a handful of cars between there, so I was surprised when I saw a car way off in the distance behind us. And it was catching up to us, too. I was surprised at the speed this car, and how it was catching up. I was already going over the speed limit by 30 kilometers per hour. I estimate going probably 160 kilometers. Nathan suggested it might be the police, so I dropped back to 100. Kind of futile, but at least we'd know if it was a cop or not. Eventually the car caught us up, but just sat behind us. There were no streetlights, being country Australia, so neither me nor Nathan couldn't accurately identify the car. But I did notice the headlights on the car were very old, something you'd find at a Model T Ford or Broom. If you've ever watched that show, they were round and fairly dim. By this stage, we worked out, wasn't a cop, but why wasn't it trying to overtake us? It was a single lane each side, 2-way road. So there was plenty of room to pass, and I hadn't seen a car going the other way in about half an hour. An overtaking lane approached us, so Nathan suggested I move into that lane so the car behind us could pass. I moved into the lane, and guess what? The car followed. I then slowed down to 80 kilometers to try and convince him to overtake, but he doesn't. He just stays behind. Although now I can't see his headlights at all. It is that close to ours. The 2 worried men decided to open the windows to see if they could discern anything from the vehicle's engine noise, but were surprised to hear that, although they were tearing along at 80 miles per hour, and the car was mere inches from their bumper, there was no noise at all emanating from it. Completely silent. And this witness would go on to explain, back at 130 and the car is still behind us, matching our speed, still inches away from our back bumper. Both me and Nathan were freaking out a bit by now. Why wouldn't the car pass us? Why was he driving so close? We were approaching Geneva by this stage. There's a big street light right on the edge of the town, and then street lights all through the main street. Excuse me. Excuse me, goodness. Finally, we'd be able to identify the car. We passed through the streetlights and looked behind us. The car stopped following right before the streetlight. It had simply stopped in the middle of the road. We still couldn't work out what kind of car it was, but we sure didn't want to turn around and find out. Interestingly, there is said to be a ghostly 1940-era big rig truck said to haunt the same roads near there. According to a news report in 1951 edition of the Argus newspaper, the mysterious truck even managed to run a truck driver clear off the road after it came heading right for him, only to pass through, as if nothing was there. The reports would say there was no crash. The maniac truck fused briefly with the big diesel outfit, passed through and out. Any connection with the ghostly car? Who knows? But Geneva seems to be a fairly scary place to drive at night either way. Australia seems to be pretty creepy over there with their mutant animals, and now we got ghost drivers and everything else. But of course, the U.S. also has its fair share of frightening accounts of mysterious cars up to no good. One is a mysterious car that is said to prowl about the area of Missouri, which actually purportedly ran Sheriff Frank Jones off the road in 1932 to cause his tragic death, and which has on occasion also caused other near crashes. Another one is sent to haunt the NC-49, which meanders through the low hills of the Uharries between Asheboro and Charlotte, North Carolina. It is said that in the 1940s, this two-lane remote road was being navigated by a family late at night when they were approached by an angry vehicle acting very aggressively, when a truck came out of nowhere and smashed it clear off the road to leave it a twisted wreck, killing the driver. It was not long after this that this stretch of road gained a reputation for having a very fast, very aggressive phantom car that will pull up behind other drivers at high speed. Most cars will pull up behind, off to the side of the road to let it pass. And as it does, they will notice it is a vintage 1940 style Ford, which even more oddly doesn't seem to have a driver. This Ford will swerve and veer around like hell to completely freak out other drivers, before dissipating into thin air as if it was never there, leaving one to wonder if this phantom remnants of that long-ago crash. A very strange, weird account comes from Hawaii in 1982 and was posted on the site Castle of Spirits. The witness claims that at the time she had been out with her visiting cousin just cruising around the area along a stretch of beachfront road at Lanikai. There were no other cars out at the time, but at some point while driving along this road, they looked back, and the witness would say, "Behind us loomed a huge black, very shiny car. I can only say it was completely out of place and had so suddenly appeared, we were both shocked into silence. We turned from the rearview mirror and looked at each other, not saying anything, but both our eyes were wide and the unspoken question between us. That took all of a second, and we both turned our heads to look out the window, and the car was gone. There was no way that car could have gone anywhere. There were no cutoffs or turns or even driveways that car could have ducked into. Just one long, narrow road. Even if there had been a place for it to go, it hadn't the time. This all happened in a second. I honestly don't remember what we did or said next, but we got out of there as quickly as possible. And I can't remember seeing any driver of the mysterious black car." But even more recently are two accounts given on the site called Your Ghost Stories. The first comes from August of 2006 and supposedly takes place in Sunland, California. The witness says that he and a friend had been driving along the isolated Big Canyon Road when they had a very bizarre encounter. At one point, the witness says that they stopped by his friend's house to pick some things up, and as he waited outside in the car, there would be some weird happenings indeed. He noticed the indistinct shape of a car speeding down a sharp turn in the road with no headlights on. And the witness would say of what happened next. It is a notorious highway for being treacherous for careless drivers, even during the daylight hours. No one can possibly drive without headlights. Yet, to my utter astonishment, I began to barely see the shape of a car coming down the road, around the bend in front of me, without any headlights or lights of any kind. My first thoughts were that this person must be desperate to try and get out of the canyon like this. Maybe they had trouble with their car. But they were still attempting to drive this impossible way. Perhaps they were hunched over the dashboard or something. I couldn't believe it, and I watched it drive right by my car. When it passed by directly parallel to the side, I looked to see who was driving. No one was in the car. It was moving very slowly and without any sounds of a motor or wheels, and like a silhouette, practically see-through. It looked like an old and grayish-colored four-door sedan-type vehicle. I just kept staring at it in amazement and looked back to see if maybe it even had rear brake lights. Nope, none of those either. Then it disappeared like all the other cars into the darkness of the highway. Also rather strange is a case from 2011 in the U.S. of North Carolina. The witness in this case said he was driving home from work one afternoon on a beautiful sunny day. Although the road was smack in the middle of nowhere, it was such a clear day that he could not have had any sort of sinister or scary vibe at all. But that would change quickly. As he approached one of the few intersections along the route, he claims he saw an antique car coming up off one of the farm roads, which he described as brown and from the 30s. He passed the car and says he was admiring the restoration work that had gone into it. No feel of the supernatural, but he would explain. After about a quarter mile, perhaps a half mile, I looked in the mirror and was surprised to see that the car was no longer there. In most cases and most places, this would come as no surprise. But here in the middle of nowhere, there was no place a car could go. I came to a place where I could turn around and backtrack to see if the car had fallen into the deep ditch. Really the only place it could go. I found nothing. In the ensuing years, I've seen the car on the same road several times, and every time I've seen it disappear. This is not to say I've actually seen the car vanish, but I'll be watching, my attention called elsewhere for a moment, and when I look back, the car is gone, and there is no place it could go to. I've told several people, and nothing. I've looked for the car parked in a yard or open barn, and again, nothing. My wife, who does believe in ghosts, thinks I'm seeing a ghostly car. Other than that, I have no explanation. Ghostly phenomena certainly run the full range of the weird, and is all largely certainly unsolved. We can only guess at what is going on beyond cases of hauntings and frightening apparitions. However, does this also include vehicles? Can cars become spectral anomalies that haunt and spook those who would encounter them? Can all this be explained with the rational, or is it all firmly entrenched within the unknown and unknowable? As always, this remains to be seen. You gotta love it. We've got a couple of stories around here. One is called Spooklight, and it's in Rocky Ridge, which isn't very far from here. But there's a piece of road there on the bridge, and you pull up there, and you turn the car off, flash your lights 3 times, and beep your horn 3 times. Now, and then all of a sudden, you'll see this red light coming at you. Well, it's white at first, and it's coming at you, and you hear the sound of a motorcycle. And it keeps coming and coming and coming. And if you try to start your car, it will not start. My daughter's been 3 times here, and she will not go back after the 3rd time. But it'll go up and over the car. And there have been tire tracks seen on the tops of vehicles. And if it turns red, it may follow you home. She swears that the one night her and her friends went, no, they weren't drinking. I'm sorry, not that time, but anyway. And the red headlight just followed them and kept following them. So, who knows? But it's called Spooklight. The story behind that is years ago, of course, it was all farmland up here. A lot of it still is. But the farmer's daughter, of course, was seeing somebody like in the line of James Dean type person. You don't want your daughter to date, okay? He rode a motorcycle, of course. And the story goes, he was, bound and determined to stop this. So he put chicken wire across the road where he would go to come into the farm area. And he came tooling along there, and lo and behold, cut his head off. They found the body, but they never found his head. The farmer said he just did it to, knock him off his bike and scare him. He didn't know that was going to happen. But supposedly he's still, looking for his head and his love, and that is what happens. So, we got some more strange phantom cars. Let's see. Let me see, looking through my notes. Got the Black Volga, that's one of the most oldest ones there. Stories. Let me see here. Let's talk about the murdering car. It's called GoldenEye. Excuse me. Let me get it here. Yeah, the murdering car, GoldenEye. Interesting story behind this one. It says, considered a real-life Christine, believe it or not, and it's a 64 Dodge, dubbed the Golden Eagle, Golden Eagle, named the most vehicle car in America. Of course, we all love Stephen King's work, Christine. It's centered on a vintage automobile that was possessed by supernatural forces. Now, the plot shouldn't be so surprising considering how well-known King is for his unconventional subjects. But what if you found out that a demonic vehicle actually existed? The Golden Eagle evil car murdered 14 people. It was a 64 Dodge limited edition. Many have considered the car haunted, earning itself the title the most evil car in America. And its story started when it was purchased as a police car for a unit based in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. Oh, convenient, Maine, right? All three officers who drove the car died in unexplained murder-suicides, brutally murdering their families and themselves. Not long after, the car went into the hands of Wendy Allen and her family, where it would begin its second wave of terror. The Golden Eagle would randomly open its doors while out on the highway, jam the steering wheel, and would put the family in other life-threatening situations. Strangely, even though the situations were alarming, the Allens never did experience the amount of violence the Golden Eagle inflicted upon its other victims. According to Wendy Allen, the Golden Eagle had killed 14 people, but many have disputed that the number is actually much higher than that. Sometime between the 80s and 90s, rumor about the killer car began to spread. It prompted members of local churches to vandalize the car out of fear that it would murder again. But their efforts backfired, and the individuals involved found themselves on the receiving end of the Golden Eagle's wrath. According to the story, some members of the said group died after being decapitated by 18-wheeler trucks. Others passed away from either stranger circumstances, such as being struck by lightning. Perhaps the most disturbing case connected to the Golden Eagle was the deaths involving children. On separate cases that happened during the 60s and 80s, 2 kids were violently hit by cars and landed on the hood of the Golden Eagle. Before paramedics could reach the scene, both victims were already dead. The stories would even get more sinister from there. A 2007 case claims that a child who merely touched the car ended up killing his entire family before burning down his home to the ground. Recently, a church group has stepped up and claimed that there was a demon inhabiting the Golden Eagle. They took action by stealing the car, chopping it up, and distributing each piece to junkyards. Wendy Allen pleaded online to have her beloved family car returned to her. Although it wasn't exactly the way it used to be, they were able to retrieve most of the car parts. But Wendy and her family would continue to experience scrutiny after that. She was labeled by the same church as the Sea Witch of Old Orchard Beach and was accused of using dark magic to curse her vehicle. She's always shrugged off the comments, claiming that people are reading too much into it. So is the Golden Eagle truly evil? You decide. So real life Christine, a Golden Eagle. Very cool, actually. There's quite a few other ones. I'm going to tell you about 4 or 5 ghost story cars. There's these 10 cars will make you scared to ever drive again. It's really kind of creepy. And of course, it's becoming near Halloween. And of course, it's when people obsessed with paranormal activity aren't just fringe wackos like they are the other 11 months of the year. Everyone is in the haunting spirit, whether they're visiting haunted houses or watching scary movies. But of course, not all frights are seasonal attractions or on the TV screen. You may have noticed that lots of scary stories, mainly supposedly true variety, involve cars, highways, or roadways, only accessible in a vehicle. And here's a list of the 10 creepiest. So if you're looking for a spooky ride, trip idea, or just like sleep for some odd reason, we'll check out these tales. Murders horseback riders in Massachusetts. Billerica, Mass., about 45 minutes northwest of Boston, is home to Old Dudley Oxford Road, where legend has it multiple nuns were murdered. Some people say they have seen one of the nuns' faces appear on the tree where some of the nuns were reportedly hung. Old Dudley Oxford Road also reportedly plays host to a ghost horseback rider that monitors the road dressed in colonial garb. The Ghost of Highway 51, and I'm going to get into this one a little bit. These type of incidents leave people doing a double take. Ever looked at a car driving next to you and thought nobody was inside? Well, apparently that was the case for a woman and her family driving through the town in Tennessee. That's kind of creepy. And that, it's not just me, obviously, but and that one is Ghost Car of Highway 58. Some of these I have heard of, but some I haven't. Excuse me. Okay, and the Ghost Car of Highway 58. And this is from an actual witness. It was a real event that made me feel like I was stepping into fiction. It was about 12 to 13 years ago. For a while, I even forgot about it, but recently it came back to my memory, and sparked my interest in the supernatural. I hate to find out I was fooled and tend to be pretty rational, so something has to be really freaky to get my attention. These are encounters people had with the ghost car, Highway 58. I was young, but I didn't think that makes it any less valid. I was about 10 years old, so I knew what was real and what wasn't. Plus, there were 2 witnesses to this story, and that shows something was up. And it still gives me the chills. So here's what happened. We lived in Tennessee at the time. We lived in a nice, family-friendly small city. Not the kind of place for anything weird to happen. We were going down one of the main roads to the store or somewhere. I'd been down there a million times, so I really wasn't interested in looking out the window. I was minding my own business until I heard my sister scream. Me and my dad both jumped. I thought she was hurt, but she wasn't hurt. She was shocked. Then I heard her say, "That car has no one in it." I looked up, and sure enough, I didn't see anyone in there. It went by really quick, but as far as I could tell, nobody was in there. But despite the lack of a driver, it seemed to be very controlled. It wasn't out to hurt anyone, and it looked like whatever was controlling that car just had places it wanted to be. It passed us nicely, just like any other normal car, and on its way it went. I watched it go down the highway as far as my eye could see. It just went the normal speed and made its way down a highway. We were about to pass under a bridge, and the car was coming from an exit ramp that went off that bridge. So that meant it had to come down and merge next to us. That's why it was so weird. The driver's window of that car was directly to the right of my sister's window. It was about eye level because it was a low car and ours was low too. How could we not see a person if there was one in there? I still remember what it looked like. It looked a little rough and old, like one of those long, low cars from maybe the late 70s. Maybe you've seen it too. So, ghost car of Highway 58, I'm sorry. This has been around. I don't know if Chris, you've heard of this ghost car of Highway 58 or not. I thought maybe you would have. Quite possibly. You can go on Google and see the ghost car of Highway 58 if you like. So, yeah, go check it out. So another car that has been seen is the car on Dead Man's Curve. Ooh, excuse me. I have to get ready for work here about an hour or so. Let's see. Let's go to the cursed car of Franz Ferdinand. This is pretty well known. And this haunting story begins a long time ago with a horrific death. It was on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in cold blood. It was a very limousine that Franz Ferdinand was driving that led him to his death. The 1910 Grafenstift double phaeton, painted in a deathly shade of blood red, has since come to be known as a cursed car for almost all of the owners preceding Ferdinand. They have been victim to their own horrific and untimely deaths. For one subsequent owner, he was found on the highway, crashed by the haunted car, while another was thrown into a wall and was killed due to a broken neck. It's argued that these tales are, of course, only folklore, and you might agree. But with a supposed track record of numbers of deaths, would you drive this car? Not to me. How about JF's haunted car of death? This is another haunting story of a cursed car and the assassination of a notable man of history. Of course, it was November 22nd, 1963, when President John F. Kennedy was shot in his Lincoln limo convertible, accompanied by the First Lady and wife, Jackie, and the Texas governor at the time. A total of 3 shots were fired, killing the President of the United States. After JFK's assassination, the 61 Lincoln limo remained in service for a number of years, including during Lyndon Johnson's presidency. Obvious upgrades were done to ensure its safety. These modifications were completed by Hess and Eisenhart. The limo has since been retired. It is found at the Henry Ford Museum. People have reported numerous accounts of supernatural activity around the car, and they say they have seen a person dressed in gray standing next to the haunted car. And of course, how could you forget Bonnie and Clyde's car, the blood-stained, bullet-ridden haunted car? This is from the 30s, of course. The criminal couple was notorious for robbing over 10 banks, murdering over 9 police officers, and killing several civilians along the way. Well, we know them to be dead. This might not entirely be true. In 1934, the couple was finally caught and killed when police ambushed them in their 1932 Ford Model 18V8. More than 100 shots were fired, leaving the car bullet-ridden and blood-stained. The state of the car and the couple's remains would have been nightmarish enough to see. But this wasn't the end for Bonnie and Clyde. The car was neither destroyed nor it was ever completely restored. It remains in that horrific condition. This haunted car can now be found at its resting place at Whiskey Pete's Casino in Primm, Nevada. Why is this car haunted, you might ask? Well, here's where it gets a little freaky. There have been several accounts where those who have taken photographs have also seen creepy objects in the pictures. Even more spooky is that when you stand close to this haunted automobile, you don't feel alone. There is something supernatural beyond the grave standing there, next to you. And they claim it could be Bonnie and Clyde. The Car of Cape Town. This is another one. We're taking you next with a story and tale of a phantom vehicle we heard to the other side of the world, to Cape Town, South Africa. Some have called this haunted automobile the jumping car of Cape Town. It is believed by some to be possessed by something nightmarish and evil. It was late one night in 2004, after a family and its guests had long since fallen asleep, that their Renault Megane suddenly took on a life of its own. Yeah, fancy schmancy car. The car began to jump backwards around the yard and roar like the devil itself. Okay. The startled family rushed out when they heard the haunting noises slay on what most would say is impossible. The car continued jumping around and revving with no driver and no keys. Going from startled to flat out scared, the family called the police. As the frightened witnesses explained what they had seen, the officers, of course, were in disbelief until the impossible happened again. The Renault roared to life and started moving backward again until it ran itself into the tree. The police were there when it did this, so they couldn't deny there was something horrifically wrong with it. The automotive company has explained as a rusty starter cable. Yeah, sure, okay. That made it rev and jump around. I don't think. Nobody was in there pressing on the gas, so there you go. The jumping car of Cape Town. That would be really freaking creepy. Now we come to one of the most famous cars, of course, as we all know. The little bastard that killed James Dean. A little Spider Porsche. Most of us have heard about the tragic death of the iconic Hollywood actor James Dean back September 30th, 1955. But have you heard the creepy tale of the haunted car he was killed in? This haunting story begins with James Dean purchasing the Porsche 550 Spider and a fellow actor, Alec Guinness, warning him of his ill-fated future. Guinness told Dean one night before joining him for a dinner that if he got into that car, he'd be dead in exactly 1 week. Now, in hindsight, we know that Guinness's warning was actually a prediction or a premonition, if you will, of Dean's actual death in a terrible traffic collision. The infamous cursed car has become known as Little Bastard, a name given by Dean's language coach, Bill Hickman. The name was later painted onto the haunted automobile that killed the great actor. But this haunting tale doesn't end here. The haunted car later found itself in the hands of George Barris, a renowned Hollywood car customizer. Once, while being stored in the garage, the whole garage caught fire, but the Porsche itself remained intact and untouched by the fire. For quite some time, Barris took the Little Bastard to several car shows and put the famous Porsche on display, until one day the car mysteriously vanished from its trailer while returning from a car show. Still, to this day, that haunted car has never been found. Did Dean come back from the grave to reclaim his beloved Little Bastard? We may never know. Here's a call from the dead. We now head to across the pond to Surrey, England, where we find the next encounter with the supernatural. One night, the police received a call about another car crash on A3 highway. You see, this highway is well known for a stretch of road where car accidents are quite frequent. The police headed out in search of the car wreckage, finding nothing. No evidence of a crash, no body, not even a fresh tread mark. It wasn't until the police force started to search the area that they stumbled upon a maroon Vauxhall Astra that crashed into a ravine. When the police inspected the car, it was covered in undergrowth. They opened the car door to find a man's body who appeared to have been decomposing for about 5 months. The police never did find any other car crashes that night. Was the call they received from the dead driver who was stuck in his car? Was this his ghost reaching out to be found and finally laid to rest? We all may be accustomed to scary stories of possessed children and demonic creatures in creepy old houses. But these haunted cars make some pretty spooky stories too, don't they? That would be really creepy. I don't know. Yeah. Just, I don't know what I do, honestly. Trying to see what we're going to go. Go next. Of course, we did the Franz Ferdinand car. Okay, back to Dean Spider. Of course, George Barris had the car. The wreck caused misfortune, reportedly falling and breaking both of a mechanic's legs as it was being moved. Barris went on to sell some of the parts from the car, with the engine going to a Californian physician named William Esrich, and the drivetrain going to a Dr. McHenry Esrich. Put the engine in a Lotus chassis, and while racing the hybrid in Pomona, California, the car suddenly flipped over, inflicting serious injuries on the physician. Dr. McHenry was even more unfortunate when, in the very same race, he careened to a tree and died after the engine of his car suddenly and inexplicably stalled. It was after that the legend of James Dean's cursed Porsche started to take off, spawning various other stories involving misery at the hands of the automobile as other weird phenomena associated with it. In one story, a would-be thief is said to have severely cut his hands while trying to steal the steering wheel from the wreck. In another incident, 2 tires that had been sold to another driver simultaneously burst and caused the car to crash. Barris would go on to loan the wreck to the California Highway Patrol to be put on display as a safety warning to drivers, the disastrous consequences of careless driving. But whatever enigmatic malevolent force was inhabiting it refused to stop. Within days of being exhibited at a garage, a major fire broke out that destroyed every vehicle except Dean's Spider. As the wreck was being hauled off to put on display at a high school, the Spider broke free from the tow truck and caused a deadly accident. Later, the little bastard went on to be displayed in Sacramento and promptly slipped from its stand to break a person's hip. As it was being moved yet again, the driver of a flatbed truck that was carrying it, George Barquis, was involved in an accident and thrown from the vehicle. As he lay reeling in pain upon the pavement, the Spider fell from its trailer and onto him, killing him instantly. In 1960, after seeming to sow mayhem wherever it went, the Spider was on its way to Los Angeles after a safety exhibit in Miami, Florida, when it disappeared without a trace from the truck that was carrying it, and no one knows where it is or what happened to it. The stories surrounding the cursed little bastard are so numerous that it's sometimes hard to tell which could be a vein of urban legend. But all these accidents are documented. So, Barris himself has been accused of concocting many of these spooky tales, but that has never been proven that they were not true. Whatever the case is, the legend lives on, and the story of James Dean's apparently evil car is certainly strange. Of course, we talked about the Golden Eagle. But the weird thing about that Golden Eagle is about the police service. And they would, and every single police officer who drove that car went on to brutally murder their families before killing themselves. It was really strange. This was nothing compared to the rats seemingly incurred by those who would vandalize the car. Excuse me, this is the Golden Eagle. In the 80s and 90s, a series of would-be vandals met a variety of horrific fates, ranging from being struck by lightning to dying in terrible car accidents, with one apparently beheaded by a semi. And of course, the children. The car's sinister reputation grew to the point where in 2010, this is where the churches cut it up. Golden Eagle, take a look at it. It does look creepy. It just gives creepy vibes. But the thing about most of these phantom cars, there's nobody driving. I have a story to tell, and it's about my ex. His family lived in Tennessee down by Kingsport and Rogersville, back in the holler back there. I never knew what that was, but I know now. Anyway, him and his brother lived down there for a while. And there was this windy road, Beach Creek Road, I believe it is, Beach Creek. And they were walking home late at night. They walked everywhere, of course, back in the day. This was when we were, all younger. But him and his brother were walking home one night. And, of course, there's fields and, few and far between. And there was this one road they were walking down. They got stuck somewhere, so they ended up walking home. And all of a sudden, this car pulls up. They didn't even hear it. About scared the crap out of them because it just pulled up and stopped, like right in front of them. And the passenger door opened. And you know how, back in, when you open your door, the dump light would come on. Well, you would think you would see a person coming back up from leaning over and opening the door. Not true. This, whatever it was, just sat there. The kind of door basically opened on its own. And my husband's brother, ex-husband, went up to the door to look in. Hey, thanks, for stopping. And the guy, or whoever it was, never said a word. All he did was turn his head and look at him. My ex described him as looking like that Reverend from Poltergeist, real cadaverous, real creepy looking. He never said a word. His brother was ready to get in the car, and my ex was like, no, we're good. We're just going up the road. We'll be there in a little bit. Thanks anyway. And he pulled his brother back. The car door closed and went on his way. Well, as they were watching it go down the road, the lights disappeared. So they were like, okay, this guy must have turned off his lights and pulled over. He's waiting for us up there. Nope. All along that road, there was no cars pulled over, no nothing. It just disappeared. It just makes you wonder what could have happened if they had gotten into that car. So, kind of creepy stuff. Creepy stuff. How about West Virginia's scariest highway? Now, Chris, you should know some of these. West Virginia's scariest highway. Yep. So you probably know this one, Chris. It's the most terrifying West Virginia road trip that'll haunt your dreams. If scary things are your speed, check out this road from northern Panhandle to the southern coalfields. There's a tunnel green in Wheeling. The tunnel green in Wheeling. This former railroad tunnel has its share of spooky stories, including about a man who was robbed and murdered there. It's known as the Hempfield Railroad Tunnel. There's also a Dingus Tunnel, Mingo County, America's bloodiest tunnel, for all the deaths that have happened inside of it. Residents of Dingus were apparently wary of outsiders and are said to have hidden outside the tunnel, shooting any travelers aboard the train. Well, that was crazy. Have you been to Lake Shawnee, Chris? West Virginia's abandoned amusement park. Crazy, crazy, crazy. There is supposedly let me see. Of course, remember Shepherdstown? The whole town, they had called in paranormal investigators, Nick Roth and Katrina. And they spent all kinds of time in Shepherdstown. They were called in because it was so haunted. If you check that out on Sci-Fi on YouTube. Trying to I'm trying to find that. And that's why I had it written down, because I couldn't find anything. But there's plenty of places in West Virginia. And I think, let me see. I'm trying to see where this is at. It's supposed to be really creepy. So, well, anyway, how about the backseat ghost? That one's interesting. He sits in your back seat. Maybe it's a ghost car at Highway 58. Nope, don't think so. That's the one in Tennessee. The ghost car, Highway 58, yeah. Let's go to the backseat ghost. That one's kind of creepy too. All these are creepy. Let's face it. Do you have a creepy area by you that's haunted by an automobile or a motorcycle or a bus or anything? Do you have anything by you? That is crazy spooky with no apparent reason that there's no explanation for. Get in the chat and let me know. Of course, we talked about the Black Volga. That one's great. We're going to be talking about some buses, the ghost plane. Of course, we talked about the car at Cape Town. You can go see this car. It is really bizarre, and it's kind of like, almost like a sedan station wagon, kind of not quite a station wagon type thing. But that's totally bizarre. Franz Ferdinand's car, that was totally weird. The Porsche Spider. We're even going to talk about a submarine here in a bit. Let me get to the backseat driver first, so then we'll go there. This is called the backseat driver. It's really kind of creepy. Okay. I'm getting it. Okay. Now I can't find what I want. Okay. Oh. Okay, we will get back to that. I can't find where I put it. Okay, let's go to... Let's get back to some other spooky Phantom vehicles. And first one being Eastern Airlines Flight 401. I don't know if you've heard about this. One of the strangest cases of alleged ghost vehicles is, of course, the Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a TriStar jetliner that crashed in December 1972 into a Florida swamp. The accident killed 101 people, including pilot Bob Loft and flight engineer Don Repo. The accident quickly earned an eerie reputation. This was not because the plane itself was haunted, but because it created other haunted planes. A number of working parts of the plane were salvaged from the crash and subsequently fitted into other planes, where the crew soon reported strange visions. The ghosts of Loft and Repo were frequently claimed to be sitting quietly by the passengers and occasionally even engaging the crew in conversation. The apparitions were said to be extremely lifelike right up until they vanished into thin air. The creepy ghost crew usually appeared in or near parts of planes that had been salvaged from 401. So there you go. There's a good reason for that, right? Once one of them appeared to a flight engineer and casually informed the terrified man he'd already made the pre-flight check for him. Another time, the face of Don Repo was reported to have manifested in an oven, salvaged from Flight 401, of course, warning 3 crew members of a fire that would take place during the flight. The plane later experienced an engine fire and had to cancel the last leg of its route. Officially, of course, Eastern Airlines doesn't comment on the phenomenon. Still, the guardian ghosts of Flight 401 are said to be something of a legend within the company. Rumors say even the company's vice president has encountered the ghosts at least once. The Silver Pylon. This is in Stockholm, the capital and peaceful and prosperous Sweden. It hides a ghastly secret in its subway system. A silvery shining ghost train called Silver Pylon, or the Silver Arrow, lurks there, stopping at random stations at random intervals. Its interiors are sometimes completely empty, sometimes filled with ghostly passengers. And if you're unlucky enough to board it, you may end up in Kimlinge, the subway station of the dead, which is it is a real, actual abandoned subway station. You might never be seen again, or you might emerge back into the world weeks or even years later. Haunted or not, the Silver Arrow is a very real train. It's an experimental vehicle that was put together from 8 aluminum-colored C5 carts. While Silver Arrow never made it to mass production, this test unit was occasionally used as a backup during rush hours. As the train was not in everyday use, its cars have no advertisements, and their only interior markings are remains of partially removed graffiti. Its unpainted, silvery look also differs radically from the usual color scheme of the Stockholm subway trains. As such, it can be quite an eerie sight when arriving. Although the Silver Arrow was only rarely active in active service and completely retired in 1996, it has gained a very frightening reputation and is still rumored to haunt the subway workers in abandoned tunnels to this very day. Now that would be creepy. Go to be taken to some abandoned subway station. Weird. Okay, how about the Phantom Bus of London? In 1934, a London motorist suddenly performed an emergency swerve while driving along Cambridge Gardens. He died a horrible death when his car hit a wall and exploded in flames. Although no reason for his behavior could be found, many witnesses stepped forward and offered a potential reason for the driver's demise: the Phantom Bus of London. Allegedly seen by many London natives between the 30s and the 90s, the ghost bus is a very real-looking red London double-decker carrying the line number 7. It always appears at a certain point at 1:15 a.m. Oh, isn't that nice when I get off from work? Thundering along the road straight towards its terrified drivers. Its lights are never on and no driver is ever visibly seen. As the panicked drivers steer to narrowly avoid collision and turn to look behind them, the bus just fades away. So, don't be out driving around 1:15 a.m. in London. How about Pippo the Ghost Plane? This one's interesting. In World War II, the Italian population was taking quite a beating. Their own fascist government and its Nazi allies terrorized them, while the Allied forces considered them an enemy. Still, the people in northern Italy had an even bigger and stranger fear. Something was out to get them, and it was personal. That something was a mysterious land called Pippo. No one knew where Pippo came from, what type of plane it was, or who piloted it. Even its allegiance, whether it was loyal to the fascists or the Allied forces, remained a mystery. Pippo came from nowhere, and it was said that it fired its machine guns at anyone foolish enough to get in its way. It was recognized by the distinctive pip-pip sound of its engines, and was mostly heard at night. Mostly. Many people were terrified of Pippo when they felt a mystical presence that was specifically after them. You had to block all lights in your house or Pippo might open fire. Its various lethal payloads were said to include exploding pens, poison candy, and powerful bombs. If Pippo was bored, it would open fire on innocent farm workers. Although Pippo sounds like a boogeyman, the ghost-like character, historians agree that there was something behind the myth. In reality, the plane known as Pippo was probably a series of British reconnaissance planes of the de Havilland Mosquito type. The plane model had a distinctive engine sound similar to Pippo, and that flew all over the countryside at night. But still, Pippo the demon plane remained a ghost in collective consciousness, a means to make the horrors of war tangible. Even in the 90s, it is still a well-known memory in northern Italy. That's creepy. That is just too creepy. How about Abraham Lincoln's Phantom Train? Perhaps one of the most famous phantom vehicles in American history. This eerie ghost steam engine is said to progress through 180 cities every April. It is essentially the ghost of the real funeral train in which Abraham Lincoln, who was known to be keenly interested in the supernatural, and even encountered his own doppelganger once. Interesting. Abraham Lincoln made his last trip. People claim that the ghost train's presence watches its clock stop. While the president himself is not seen, his only presence is known as a coffin covered by an American flag. His ghostly remains are guarded by the spirits of soldiers dressed in Union uniforms. The train is said to emerge from a cloud of thick black fog towing its dark cars. Its arrival makes the air noticeably heavier and colder to all living souls present. Its progress appears to emulate the 2,700 or 1,650 miles funeral procession of the actual funeral train, except it never arrives at its destination of Springfield, Illinois. Oh, crazy stuff. And how about the haunted German war submarine? Interesting. During World War I, submarines were powerful weapons, of course. One of the more dangerous types was the German UB-3 class. Submarines of this type managed to sink 507 enemy ships during the conflict, including the feared battleship HMS Britannia. One UB-3 submarine was particularly dangerous both to its enemies and its crew. First off, its building process was a disaster. 3 builders suffocated on diesel fumes, and 2 more were crushed by a falling girder. During its testing stage, 1 crew member was swept overboard, never seen again, and the very first test drive sank the submarine to the bottom because of a ruptured ballast tank. The crew lay hapless on the ocean floor for hours as the interior slowly filled with poisonous gases released by a damaged battery. Though the vessel was rescued, every man became violently sick and 2 of them died from exposure to the gas. Somehow the submarine was still declared seaworthy, and during its early missions, a freak torpedo explosion killed 8 crewmen and an officer. Soon the officer's ghost was reported haunting the ship, and soon after that, the captain was decapitated by flying shrapnel. That night, several crew members reported seeing the dead officer's ghost guarding his headless body. At that point, the entire crew of the U-65 decided they'd had enough and requested a transfer. But the German Navy couldn't find a replacement crew until they agreed to perform an exorcism on the ship. But this didn't help. Just a few months later, an American submarine ambushed the U-65 and exploded it with torpedoes. Or did they? The American captor later told them they never had a chance to fire. According to him, the U-65 exploded all by itself. Oh, creepy. So there are some strange other vehicles, planes, trains, and automobiles. Just Have any of you ever encountered any of this? Um, anything like this before? Just curious. I hope I never do. That would really be a little creepy, even for me, and I like creepy. Um, so, we're going to move on to the stories of Death Road. Many legends are associated with Shades of Death Road, which winds up alongside Jenny Jump Street State Forest up to Alamuki in Warren County, one of the most famous street names in New Jersey, roadside culture. This road runs along an old haunted lake bed, which occasionally has pillars of mist rising from the top of the water. I don't know what caused it, but I've seen it when I was fishing, states Pete Valier. I think it was a legend about the early settlers killing the Indians and throwing them into the lake. This phenomenon is also called the Great Meadows Fog. Some people claim to see the dead walking along the road in the mist. Shades of Death Road also runs by the Dark Moon Bar, a must-stop on any weird New Jersey trip. The road was also the site of many deaths, once thought to be a curse on the area. But Chrissy Waters, an employee of the general store in Johnsonburg, said her mother had told her it was some kind of plague caused by the water that was responsible. Someone is always trying to steal the sign, says Waters, and they greased up the pole to stop that. One story about this place. The first one is when this person was up there with a couple of friends one night. We were all sitting at Ghost Lake. They had flashlights. When this car filled with kids drove by, they had flashlights, and at first they looked like they were just shining them on us to try and freak us out. Of course, it didn't work, so we motioned for them to pull in, and they asked us if we saw the guy. They told us there was some guy walking really strangely by the guardrail on the side of the road. He was wearing a flannel shirt, overalls, and kind of limped. But when the kids drove by to get a good look, he kept turning his head and just disappeared. You have to remember that there were 4 kids about 20 feet away from this guardrail, and they didn't even have a clue. Another story is another time while parked at Ghost Lake. They also called it Ghost Lake. My friend and I were sitting there in the car, and it was about 2 or 3 in the morning. The people who maintained the park were trying to grow grass or something because there was hay on the ground. I remember sitting there for about 10 minutes about to leave when all of a sudden I saw the hay move. But it wasn't from the wind. The hay moved like somebody was walking on it. Footprints went all the way around the car over and over again. And this went on for about 10 or 15 minutes. The whole time I was sitting there going, "Did you see that?" And my friend was like, "Yeah, that's crazy. What the hell is that?" And then it stopped, and they left. We don't have any clue what it was, but it wasn't wind or small animals. They were actual footprints. This last story about shades is the best, though. There's an old cabin that's right off Ghost Lake. You can barely see it in the day, but at night, forget it. If you don't know where to look, you won't find it. This is a story now. So me and a couple of kids were inside it one night, and I remember it was trashed. The windows all broken, the walls were falling apart, the floor had holes in it. The place was a mess. In one of the far corners of the house is a hallway with a piano built into the wall. The keys are all smashed up on it, and that alone is enough to be kind of creepy. We went on exploring the place and then went upstairs. And I was the last person up the stairs. I remember that, so there wasn't anybody else down there. All of a sudden, the piano sounded like someone banged on it really hard. And it happened again. And there was a crunching sound like the glass on the floor was being stepped on. This sound came closer and closer down the hallway. Our first reaction was that it was the cops. But when we heard the sound right in front of us and saw no flashlights, we quickly ruled out that. So someone shined a light in the area. There was nothing there. Of course, we got out of there as quickly as we could and didn't look back. And when we got to the road, we noticed there were no cars parked along the side. So it wasn't anybody messing with us. shadowy past, the long saga of Shades of Death Road. Out of all the grim monikers encountered out on the roads less traveled throughout New Jersey, perhaps none is more foreboding than the infamous Shades of Death Road. Like many places steeped in local lore, reality and legend have become intertwined over the years. And it obscures exactly what can be considered fact regarding this highway. What is known is that for centuries, this road has been a dark, mysterious thoroughfare for travelers to cut across one of the more isolated parts of the state. What isn't known is exactly how the road earned its curious name. According to one legend, murder is at the root of Shades of Death name. One tale relating to murder says that the original inhabitants of the area surrounding Shades of Death were an unruly band of squatters. Often men from this vile gang would get into fights over women, and the squabbles would result in the death of one of them. As the reputation of these murderous bandits grew, the area they inhabited was named Shades of Death. When the civilized world encroached and disbanded the bandits, the last remnant of their control over the meadows was restricted to one road that retained the name, and they made it famous. Another murder theory says that the road was originally known as the Shades because of low-hanging trees which formed a canopy over the length of the street. Legend says that over time many murders occurred there, and many stayed unsolved, causing local residents to add the sinister of death twist to the formerly pleasant name. Of course, there are still other explanations of how Shades acquired its name and have less to do with murder and more to do with death by natural causes. Shades of Death traverses an area long known as the Great Meadows, which upon its original settlement was a vast area of marshy swampland. Around 1850, an outbreak of malaria carrying insects was discovered near a cliff face along the Shades. As the citizens around Shades came to expect the yearly outbreaks of this terrible disease, they began to anticipate the annual spate of deaths of friends and family members which came along with it. Like any community, their landmarks, in particular this one road, came to reflect the morose attitude they had. Traveling along Shades of Death today, it is still a mysterious, foreboding place. Whatever the real origins of the name are, something about this tract of land caused its earliest settlers to imbue upon it a name which speaks of death. No matter which legends or facts you choose to believe, it would seem that the road's name was offered up as a warning from beyond the grave to those who might travel this dark path, unaware of its potential hazards. Though we may never know for sure how the road actually got its name, it might be good to heed those warnings and say a little prayer when traveling on Shades of Death Road. Kind of creepy road there. There is just so many things. Phantom cars are the creepiest. I think that, those are, like I said, we have one close to where I live called Spooky. Let me know in the chat, if you have areas like that around you. So many stories surrounding these vehicles and tragic or, horrific deaths around these. It is, some of them I had not heard of, but there you go. Just really, really strange. Anyway, I'm glad you... hope you're listening to this tonight. I'm not physically here, but you're hearing me. So, excuse me. But all these cars and vehicles, phantom ones, if you know of any, please let me know. Pretty soon we're going to be doing, I'd like to do, I think maybe after Halloween we'll do one about, there's not just the Bermuda Triangle, there are several triangles that are like that, and hopefully we'll get to that before the end of the year. Do you ever hear of melon heads? This is kind of creepy. It's just kind of an add-on to what we've been talking about. It really is kind of creepy. They're called melon heads. Have you ever heard of them? Um, Hang on just a second. They're called melon heads. Um, and they're bizarre melon heads. And I just want to touch upon it because it's so creepy. Um, Actually, the story started from the wilds of Ohio here. So I'm going to leave that because I'm going to put that with the next episode um, of like the pale, gosh, I can't think of them, the pale crawlers and all this stuff going on. So I'm going to put the melon heads in with that, I think. And I apologize that this is on Thursday instead of Saturday, but usually DWD is on tonight. But however, I wanted to be live when doing that because it is going to be so cool. That will be on Saturday because I'm off and I want to be able to do it. So I decided to put the encounters on tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. So, lots of creepy things going on. Haunted places, haunted vehicles. We'll be talking more of all this, in October. Ooh. What are your plans? Do you going to any ghost hunts, creepy places? I want to do a ghost hunt this year yet. So let's hope it happens. Can't think of anything else. I pretty much covered the vehicles pretty much. Hope you enjoyed it again. Please, in the chat, let me know if you have any creepy cars or vehicles or know of any creepy planes, trains, or automobiles that you have encountered or know of. Let's do the fall lineups. Of course, today, again, this is pre-recorded. I hope you're listening to this tonight. Encounters of the Strange Kind. Afterwards, join Lolita's Jam. She plays hip-hop. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. I'm sorry. Hip-hop, some underground music, and new artists. So please, tune in and say hey to her. Also, tomorrow we have Hollywood Review. And then after that, our own big freak, Chris Stevens, has Freaks in the Basement, which is Sheldon, sorry. So please tune into that. Stop by and say, hey, it is an awesome show. It's some great music. And of course, the Freaks will be there to say hey. Saturday, join Michelle Auger with Ecto. Very creepy stuff. I absolutely love that. Afterwards, it's usually paranormal night, but Saturday it's going to change up. Join myself with DWD, Decades with Denise. We're going to do part 2 of Power Metal. And of course, those bands are going to include Camelot, Hammerfell, Nightwish, Dragon Force, Elven King, all of those. And that's why I want to do that live because it is just so cool. There are some of my favorite bands and these are from the 90s. So, in that aspect, the 90s were fabulous with these power metal bands. So, tune into that on Saturday night. And then after that, join Ike Diaz with The Jam with Mr. Ike Dog. Tune into that. He plays music from A to Z and anything in between. Awesome podcast if you can stay up. Sunday, join me for American Horror Story. Oh, how cool is this getting? I'm absolutely loving this season so far. Hope you are too. So tune in to American Horror Story on Sunday. Monday, we have Planet B, period, O, period, B, period, Planet B-O-B with Michelle and myself. And we'll be doing Getting Ready for Winter. So tune into that for some great tips on what you should be doing. Tuesday, join Gary Martinez and myself for Sport Talk at about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 m. Mountain Standard Time for Sport Talk. And, of course, we're going to break down the Broncos game Monday night and other sports and other football games and stats and injuries and whatnot. So tune into that. Give us your opinions on the games. Wednesday, we're back with Fear the Walking Dead. Should be the final episode. Guess what's coming up, guys? Of course, The Walking Dead. Cannot wait. It looks absolutely fabulous. I'm so excited. So, a couple shout-outs. Shout-out to True Horror Junkies, of course. Typhoid Marys. Art of Darkness. Horror 3 Ring Circus. Walking Dead Freak Show. Survival Wolves with Mike Ronan. If you go on Facebook, make sure you click on the group that has 2,000 plus members, not the copycat group that has 500. Okay? The 2,000 plus is the real Survival Wolves group. Shout out to Planet B, period, O, period, B, period. Both have excellent tips, things for prepping, just, maybe some ordinary questions. What to do when the electricity goes out? What can you do? So, check these pages out. I think you'll really enjoy them. Also, Julie Kinney's Conflicted, What If Scenarios. Very, very cool. She is an awesome lady, so please check that out. King Barker and Beyond, of course. And I can't think of anybody else. If I'm forgetting you, I'm sorry. Also, please message me, Denise Harris, if you have any thing you want me to talk about, some ideas, either regarding encounters or music or whatever. Please let me know, because I would love to do it for you. So that kind of wraps it up, I think. I can't think of anything else. Of course, Halloween is coming. Going to be so cool. Can't wait. Halloween month. Yay! And then it's on to the crazy stuff, right? So I know a lot of people love the fall weather. It's a little cooler. I'm still a summer person. I like fall with the warmer weather. If that makes sense. So, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening tonight. Have a great night. Peace out, y'all.
sits at the foot of your bed.